Assassin's Creed Shadows is not what you think. In the wake of AC Shadows releasing, we have heard a lot of things. We've got opinions ranging from high praise to outright disdain. There's negative narratives about a whole host of things. There were Steam player count comparisons, complaints about dialogue and combat or gameplay criticisms, but there was also a lot of praise. It's a technically strong game, it's graphically impressive, it has high user scores, and we're seeing reports of good sales. So what's the problem? Why is this game being so divisive, and why is the conversation now moving to whether or not the game can save Ubisoft? Well, I really would like to talk to you about all the things that Assassin's Creed Shadows is not. Because despite what you may have heard, AC Shadows is not what you think. And my hope is that there is a larger silent majority out there that's tired of all the negativity and toxicity about this game, but gaming in general as well. I'm trusting that there's more of us that just want to get back to enjoying games. So if that's you, sit back and listen to all the things that AC Shadows is not. And hopefully, we can get back to what gaming is all about. But before I do that, if at any point during this video you enjoy it, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you can catch my other content as well as my live streams. The first thing we can definitively say is that AC Shadows is not a flop. If you look at the sales reports already, Ubisoft has indicated it is the second highest day one revenue in franchise history, and that's saying something. There are a lot of Assassin's Creed games out there, and a lot of them have done very well. The physical copy sales of Monhun Wilds in the UK were actually surpassed by Assassin's Creed Shadows. So that's just one particular instance where you're actually seeing the game outperforming one of the more popular games this year with respect to sales. Now, it's not outselling Monhun Wilds in general, but it did well in that market if it's actually surpassing that game in particular. It was at the top of the list of the Steam top sellers the entire opening weekend. Like, that's not easy to do. It's actually still in the top 5 of the Steam top seller charts globally when I was recording this video. That's not easy to do after being out for almost an entire week. And the Steam concurrent player numbers went up every day all the way to Sunday. Now, that typically means that word of mouth is spreading. People are playing. It's going up. It's not going up and then immediately going down the next day. And this is where the Steam player numbers were, I think, giving people a very false sense of confidence to decry the game as a failure. They were comparing it to Dragon Age Veilguard, and it was a very bad faith comparison because if you compare it to the other Assassin's Creed games, it was doing just fine. If you compare it to something like, let's say, Jedi Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor, both of those games pulled similar numbers, and they were both very commercially successful. The history of Assassin's Creed is actually stronger on console. Not surprising, Ubisoft and their behavior on PC was annoying for a while there, and it makes sense that they have a larger player base on the consoles. And we have sales data from Ubisoft that is showing 73% of the sales were from the console. There was only 27% of the activations landing on PC. So what this means is that it couldn't have been a flop if this is what they're reporting. And people that they say that, oh, well, they're not being honest, they're just fudging the numbers. The sales reports will come out soon. You can't walk out into the public and lie about your sales numbers because that's going to affect share value and shareholders, and when you're publicly traded, that can be a problem. Now, as far as the franchise history is concerned, it's landing above Origins and Odyssey. It's behind Valhalla. Well, that's a solid place to be. There was a lot of hype. There was a lot of expectations and a lot of hate just sort of hanging in the air around this game before it released. In light of all these data points, I think it's clear that the game is not a flop. But there's another thing that this game was not, and it was certainly not a failure. It's honestly hard to consider this game a failure when you look at all of the praise it has received. I mean, first and foremost, the technical praise is undeniable. Digital Foundry has heaped just tons of glowing remarks and videos about this game. They called the PS5 Pro Performance Mode a generational leap. They even did a deep dive into all the engine upgrades that went into place just for AC Shadows. We've got user clips and response to the graphical beauty and the performance of this game pretty much everywhere. It's been very, very strong. To argue that it's not technically or graphically strong would just be completely disingenuous. I can't imagine anybody who's been playing games for any number of time not seeing that this game is very good looking. But beyond that, it's not just good looking. The user scores are undeniable. right now it's landing very, very well with the audience. The score on Steam actually went up from an 80% to an 82%, and it's got 10,000 reviews. It's not easy to move that percentage of your review score after those first couple thousand reviews, right? It tends to be difficult. I actually think the Steam score will go up over time because some of those technical problems are being resolved, and also users start to learn how to tweak and turn things down. It has a 94% on the PlayStation Store with even more reviews. It has 11,000 reviews on the PlayStation Store. It has an 88% on the Xbox Store. Its OpenCritic is an 81. Its Metacritic ranges from 82 to 85. This is all well within the score range of other AC titles like Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. It would just be simply dishonest to claim that this game is a failure with the level of critical and consumer reception that we're seeing. We would never say this about another game. You would never look at a game in the mid to low 80s on Metacritic and OpenCritic, in the mid to high 80s on your user scores, or even in the 90s on your user scores, and say, oh, well, that game was certainly a failure. That would be laughed at. But for some reason, this game is just given all sorts of false summaries, despite clear data points that you can see. You couldn't even claim that these are paid-for reviews or media bias when the user score is either right in line with the critical score like we're seeing on Steam, or it's quite a bit higher like we're seeing on PlayStation. And as I said, I think the Steam score will naturally go up over time, which will make the critical scores and critical reception end up being lower than the user score. So if you're even going to try to claim there's some sort of a media bias or some sort of an agenda to pay for review scores, the people who are buying the game, the users, the gamers, the ones whose opinion probably matters the most, they're liking the game. They're scoring it well. So it's clearly not a flop. It's clearly not a failure. And yes, I'm going to say it. It's not woke. Listen, the ongoing insistence about games being woke or not is not something I want to get bogged down into, but I will say, going into Assassin's Creed Shadows, I was concerned. There were elements within Dragon Age Veilguard that I thought were handled very poorly, and it obviously did not help that game because some of the dialogue in one particular character was just so unbelievably cringy that it gave me secondhand embarrassment. So I was a little concerned, how are they going to handle Yasuke in particular? And I actually thought it was handled really well. It honestly reminded me of The Last Samurai and how Katsumoto takes an interest in Tom Cruise's character. You have this person who's a warrior, and they're known for great battles and great fighting, and they see somebody who is very different than them, and yet they take a huge interest in them. I actually thought the way they handled this was accurate as well. If you had a very insulated culture, they would react to someone looking like Yasuke as a sort of, wait, what's going on? Who is this person? Why do they look so different than me? It wasn't glib, it wasn't canned, and it certainly wasn't preachy. And they could have made it preachy. He goes from slave to warrior. But it was very subtle with how they had the worldview clashing. You have a warrior who sees him as a combat aware, danger aware, but also strong person, and hey, we could align with this person. I want this person on my side. And the other worldview was, well, he's big and strong, so we're going to treat him more as a tool. And I think it was understated. They didn't really put it in your face, and I actually found it very interesting. I would have watched a TV show about this because it's one of the things that is so interesting in The Last Samurai is seeing somebody from outside the culture suddenly training within the culture of the samurai. Also, if you're worried about the romance options and how that's sort of being thrust out there right now, those were in Odyssey. Those were in Valhalla, right? This has been in so many games, even prior to Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla, that I don't see why people are so upset about it. There's been plenty of games all the way back to Mass Effect where you could romance somebody of the same gender if you wanted, right? And the thing is you actually have to go to great lengths to even get to that point. You don't like stumble into it, right? Unless you're friend of the channel, Doc Dark, had a funny video about what happened to him in Starfield, but you're not going to stumble into this. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to pursue it like with intention. That means anybody providing clips, they intentionally pursued that. They went down all the flirtation lines to get to the point that romance was an option. That means it's not shoved in your face. And if you don't want those options there at all, there's something called canon mode. It removes the entire option. That's sort of a mic drop. If you're concerned about this stuff and you think it's going to like affect the quality of the game or your experience, you can just select the mode that removes the options entirely. Like, I get not wanting certain things in games, right? You're free to have that opinion, but it's such a microscopic fraction of what is actually in this game. And before you make any claims about historical accuracy and, well, they marketed this game, they wanted to be as authentic as possible, the interview about being as authentic as possible was specifically talking about making sure that the setting and the buildings and the design of those buildings was authentic. This is something that AC has always been known for. They take you to a historical location, and the buildings that you climb and the streets that you walk on feel real. They feel authentic to the time and the place. It's supposed to be sort of like historical tourism, right? If you want to get extra critical about the cherry blossoms or the food sold in the market, I mean, by all means, go for it. I don't find that to be that impacting of my experience. But if you're really going to get rigid on this, I don't think Leonardo da Vinci was making gadgets to help assassins. I don't think the Pope has ever been a wizard, at least not that we know of. I don't think George Washington was ever a king. But those are all completely fictional things that have been happening and done within historical figures in previous Assassin's Creed games, making Assassin's Creed Shadows just another game in a long line of games that have done just that. But since you can't claim the game flopped or failed or even really claim that it's woke, many are quickly moving the goalposts to a whole new argument, and it's now just one more thing that Assassin's Creed Shadows is not. It feels strange having to say this, but AC Shadows is not Ubisoft's savior. Suddenly hanging the fate of Ubisoft on the game's neck is just a goalpost shift into another universe. They have close to 20,000 employees, and the problems that Ubisoft are facing are real. They are. And one of the sad realities about AC Shadows is we may end up losing a lot of talent or a lot of the studios or people who have historically worked on Assassin's Creed games, even though this game has been very successful. And even though they've indicated they have ongoing plans, they want to do more with this game. But the current situation with Ubisoft is dire. They are so large and in such a bad situation. The hope would be that someone like Tencent is able to buy them and retain most of the talent and most of the IP. Cheering for studios to be shut down or people to be laid off is a very strange thing that I've seen in the discussion about this. We don't want to lose talent. We don't want to lose that institutional knowledge and experience, even though they fell prey to some things that I have called production line gaming. Ubisoft continuing to just crank out games that were all too similar, and it started to see depreciating returns. They also had just financial disasters like situations like Skull and Bones, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, Star Wars Outlaws. Well, these are kind of the results of production line gaming. Avatar could have been great if it wasn't Blue Far Cry. Even I had to concede that after enjoying the opening hours of the game. But none of this falls on Assassin's Creed Shadows. None of this is that game's responsibility. Suddenly shifting the argument in the dialogue to that, to me, is just conceding that it didn't fail, it didn't flop, and it's not woke. You're just trying to grasp one last thing that you can say negatively about it, which I think has nothing to do with the game, and inadvertently, that's high praise for the game. That it's done so well and is seemingly overcome all of these obstacles of hate, criticism, and the campaigns and the brigading against it. It seemingly did well despite all of that, so we're just going to run to the Alamo of, well, it's not going to save Ubisoft. Well, that was never the game's responsibility. It was meant to come out and be in a good Assassin's Creed game, and I think, in light of everything I've just said, there's really only one conclusion to come to. AC Shadows has cemented itself strongly in the history of the franchise. It's sitting well with the critics. It's sitting well with the users, which that matters more to me. And that's really all it needed to do. This was a long-awaited Assassin's Creed game, going to feudal Japan and being able to play as a ninja and a samurai all in one game, and the graphics and the technical praise is just seemingly never-ending. Every single video I've seen breaking down this game just can't stop singing its praises, and if it's landing well with the users, then that's really all it was supposed to do. Because the truth is, the gamers won and the haters lost. But those are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can leave that in a comment below, or make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can be here for those live discussions. They get pretty fun. And as always, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe.